Let me ask you something that you probably avoid asking yourself. When was the last time you did something not because it felt good, not because it earned you praise, but simply because it was right? Think about that for a moment. How much of your life is spent chasing approval, comfort, or distraction? How often do you wake up, scroll through endless feeds, work a job that drains you, agree to things you don't believe in, only to collapse into bed wondering why nothing feels meaningful? This is the quiet ache most people carry. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Deep down, you already know that the life you're living isn't fully yours. It's a patchwork of habits, fears, and compromises stitched together by the demands of society. And yet, there's a voice inside you, a voice that whispers that you were meant for something more, that life has depth and dignity and a moral shape to it. But you've forgotten how to listen. Today, we're going to listen. Because over 200 years ago, a strange and stubborn philosopher named Immanuel Kant wrote a kind of rule book for life. Not a guide to pleasure, not a handbook to success, but a manual for living with meaning no matter what the world throws at you. And it might just be the perspective you've been searching for. Kant wasn't glamorous. He wasn't a revolutionary soldier or a dazzling artist or even a famous orator. He lived in Königsberg, never married, and kept such a rigid routine that neighbors would set their clocks by the moment he walked past their window. By all modern standards, he would seem boring. But inside his quiet life, Kant was wrestling with the hardest questions humanity faces. What makes an action truly good? How should we live when pleasure and success are fleeting? What kind of life is worthy of being lived? Unlike many before him, he didn't believe the answer was happiness. Happiness, Kant argued, is fickle. It depends on luck, circumstances, and whims that are often beyond our control. A meaningful life, he believed, had to be built on something deeper, something unshakable. So, what was it? Kant called it duty. Now, duty might sound cold, outdated, even oppressive. You might picture an army general barking orders, or a strict parent denying you freedom. But Kant's idea of duty is something much more profound. For him, duty was about aligning your life with principles that go beyond self-interest. It meant choosing what is right, not because it benefits you, but because it's universally right. Here's the key. Kant believed that every person carries within them a kind of moral compass, not given by religion, not imposed by society, but hardwired into our very rational nature. He called it the categorical imperative. That's a mouthful, but its essence is simple. Act only in a way that you could will to become a universal law. In other words, before you do anything, lie, cheat, help, harm, ask yourself, what if everyone in the world did this? Would it still make sense? Would it still be good? That's the test. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're desperate for money, and you consider lying to a friend to borrow some. On the surface, it solves your problem. But what if lying became universal? If everyone lied whenever they were in trouble, trust would collapse. Promises would mean nothing, and society itself would disintegrate. So, lying fails the test. But honesty, keeping your word, passes. If honesty were universal, trust would thrive, relationships would deepen, and cooperation would flourish. Do you see? Kant's moral law is not about short-term gain, but about whether your action honors the humanity in everyone, including yourself. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. By this measure, so many of our daily actions fail. White lies we tell to avoid conflict. Promises we break because it's inconvenient. The shortcuts we take when no one is looking. We think they're small, harmless, but each one erodes the very fabric of meaning. At this point, you might be asking, but isn't that exhausting? Living every moment by some strict moral law? Yes, it is. And that's the point. Meaning isn't supposed to be easy. We're addicted to comfort. We treat convenience like a god, but comfort doesn't satisfy the soul. Think of the moments in your life that actually matter, the ones that make you proud, the ones that changed you. Were they easy? Or did they demand sacrifice, discipline, courage? Kant's Rulebook isn't designed to make life pleasant. It's designed to make it worth living. Here's a twist most people miss. Kant didn't believe morality was about obeying external authority. It wasn't about fearing punishment or earning reward. True morality, he argued, comes only when you choose the good for its own sake. That means, if you're honest only because you're afraid of being caught, you're not truly moral. If you're kind only because it makes you feel good, you're not truly moral. Morality begins the moment you act not for yourself, but out of reverence for what is right. That's radical, because it strips away every excuse we use to justify our behavior. It doesn't matter if no one's watching. It doesn't matter if you benefit or not. What matters is whether your action could be a principle for all of humanity. Let's pause here. Think about your own life. When was the last time you chose the harder path? Simply because it was right. When was the last time you acted in a way you would want everyone else to imitate, even if it cost you something? Maybe it was telling the truth when it risked embarrassment. Maybe it was showing up for a friend even though you were exhausted. Maybe it was refusing to cut corners, even when you knew no one would notice. Those moments may have felt small, but they are the hidden bricks of a meaningful life. And here's another uncomfortable truth. If you build your life only around pleasure, success, or reputation, you will eventually feel hollow. Because those things are borrowed. They depend on circumstances beyond your control. But duty, that's yours. No one can take it from you. Even in the worst conditions, even in poverty, in failure, in solitude, you can still choose to act with integrity. That's why Kant's philosophy mattered so much in his time, and why it still matters now. He lived in an age of rising individualism, where personal freedom was celebrated. But Kant reminded the world that freedom is empty without responsibility. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. True freedom is obeying the moral law you give to yourself. Let me share a story. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, later wrote that meaning comes not from what we take, but from what we give. In the camps, everything was stripped away: possessions, dignity, health. Yet some prisoners, even in the face of starvation and death, shared their bread or comforted others. By Kant's measure, these were acts of moral greatness. Even when the world collapsed into cruelty, they chose to act as if their principles were universal. They upheld the dignity of humanity when everything else denied it. And this reveals a hidden power. The smallest act of moral courage can shine brighter than all the pleasures of the world. But let's not romanticize this. Living by Kant's Rulebook is brutal at times. It asks you to sacrifice comfort, to resist temptation, to disappoint others, and to hold yourself to standards the world won't applaud. You might feel lonely. You might feel misunderstood, because we live in a culture that celebrates success over integrity, image over substance, convenience over truth. But the paradox is this: by following your duty, you align with something bigger than yourself. You discover a kind of inner strength that no setback, no rejection, no failure can take away. And in that strength, you find meaning. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a choice. You can keep living by impulse, chasing approval, comfort, and distraction. But sooner or later, you'll face the haunting silence of a life unanchored. Or you can take the harder path. You can choose to ask yourself every day, what if everyone lived like this? Would the world be better? Would I respect myself? And when you answer and you act, you will feel something deeper than pleasure. You will feel dignity. You will feel meaning. Maybe that's what Kant was really trying to tell us, that the universe doesn't owe us happiness, that the world won't hand us purpose, but that within each of us there's a compass pointing toward the good, if only we have the courage to follow it. So, ask yourself now, if your life were a rule book, what would its first law be? Would you be proud if everyone lived by it? Because in the end, the measure of your life is not how much you took or how comfortable you were. It's how faithfully you lived by the law you knew to be right. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the only rule book that really matters.